At LinkHumans, we've spoken to countless HR leaders from around the world, all trying to measure employer brand. The Employer Brand Index is used by GE and Unilever on a quarterly basis to uncover and measure their reputation as an employer. With a final score, they can track over time to see how things are changing. We look at what candidates, employees, and alumni say about your organization in an employment context. If you're looking to research your employer reputation, or if you're developing an EVP, this would be the perfect time to create your Employer Brand Index baseline. You'll get a full report of insights and recommendations that you can use to improve your employer brand over time. Head over to employerbrandindex.co and start measuring.
Hey, son, Svejson, it's Jürgen Sundberg here with the Employer Branding Podcast, brought to you by your dear friends here at LinkHumans. And we are, of course, the originators of the LinkHumans Employer Brand Index. Yeah, measuring employer reputation, employer brand, all that good stuff. Now, this week, we have a company that you've probably heard of. You might even have some investments with them. And we're going to learn about how they do employer brand, but also, very interestingly, how the function is set up. So it's not just about attracting candidates, it's also about retaining staff, as well as reaching out to the wider community and really looking at the impact the company has as an employer. So let's start the show. Hey, Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jürgen. It's a great pleasure to be a guest. I've been listening actually for about a year and a half now, so really enjoy the opportunity. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, my pleasure. So please introduce yourself to our listeners. Who are you and what is it that you do?
So I'm Julie Wolf, and I lead the employer brand team at T. Rowe Price. I took on the team 3 weeks before the start of the pandemic in the U.S., and since then we've grown to 3 marketing managers, 1 program manager, a marketing specialist, and a project manager. So there are a total of 7 of us now. Our remit actually extends well beyond recruitment marketing. We also take on retention marketing activities, and we're also responsible for marketing the firm's commitment to the communities in which our employees live and work.
That's really interesting. Retention marketing activities. That's don't hear that too often for employer brand, but I love that you've got that focus as well. Now, T. Rowe Price. Some of us will know that name, but can you give us the lowdown on what the company is?
Absolutely. Right. So T. Rowe Price is a premier asset manager founded in Baltimore, Maryland, in the U.S. in 1937. And essentially, we help people close the gap between the money they have and the money they'll need so they can live with confidence in their finances. So we offer investment funds, advisory services, retirement plans, and retirement services for individuals and institutions and financial intermediaries. We are a global company. We have offices in 16 countries and about 7,100 employees, and we look after about $1.6 trillion of our clients' invested money. Trying to think, some products which American listeners might be familiar with include our college savings plan. And by college, of course, I mean university for the UK listeners. These are tax-advantaged growth savings plans which parents or other relatives can open for children as soon as they're born or at any time in their youth to prepare for the cost of university tuition. So an interesting fact, Jürgen, is that the company was founded by Thomas Rowe Price and T. Rowe Price and 3 other associates, 2 of whom were women. So Isabella Craig handled statistical calculations and accounting for the firm before she became the secretary of the corporation and a client-facing counselor who was in charge of many accounts. Ms. Craig's excellent writing skills actually influenced Mr. Price's own thought leadership. Long before it was called thought leadership, Mr. Price was passionate about sharing thought leadership, given he founded the firm on fundamental investment research. And the other woman was Marie Walper, who was a founding associate along with Mr. Price, who handled all operational and administrative tasks and later served as treasurer of the company. I say all of that because in 1937, it was rare to see any women in the business world, and certainly in any capacity beyond administrative. And yet 50% of our company was made up of women who were foundational to getting it off the ground. So you might say that was an early commitment to D&I.
There we go. I like it. Okay, so $1.6 trillion under management. So I can imagine some of our listeners might have their 401k plans or equivalent pension savings with the company. And also some of our listeners who might work in HR might have you as a supplier. So a lot of crossovers here. And if we turn to the talent challenge, what are you faced with at T. Rowe Price?
Right. So the talent challenge is real. The talent challenge is threefold for us. First, for many years, we were able to rely on our excellent reputation as an employer of choice in the Baltimore region. So like many since the pandemic, we're now competing against employers everywhere. In many cases, all the prospective employee needs is a laptop, to complete the core tasks of the job. The saving grace, of course, is that many employers are also in the same boat. So we are rethinking our EVP to explain the T. Rowe Price difference to prospective talent. And I would say the second talent challenge is for tech talent. We do have top technologists at the firm who are working with a wide variety of technologies such as AEM, AWS, Angular, Java, Python in a cloud-first environment. But the talent challenge is that we're not a technology company, so we're competing against those who are, despite the fact that we do have a wide range of serious and important technology roles at the firm. And I would say the third challenge is our sincere desire to increase diversity at the firm. We've been in the DE&I space for over 20 years at T. Rowe Price. Early in my career, I worked for another multinational who was doing what's now known as DE&I work, but for them, it was just the way they wanted to do business. And I would say T. Rowe Price is very much the same way. I've been able to bring the experience of working on issues that made legislative changes and international headlines to my current role. And in partnership with a number of colleagues, we've led the firm into conversations and commitments to meaty issues, like narrowing the racial wealth gap between white and non-white households in America and examining the structural barriers to wealth creation.
Wow. So that has a real purposeful dimension to your role, I can imagine.
It is. It makes it very interesting and a lot of fun.
So, Julie, what does this have to do with recruitment marketing?
Well, this ties into our message of opportunity for all. So we know that financial wellness can have such an impact on mental and physical health outcomes. And we're working hard in all of our office locations, whether that's in Baltimore City or in London or in New York City, to leverage our highly engaged employee volunteer population, our T. Rowe Price Foundation grants, our signature financial education program, which is called Money Confident Kids, to help close the racial wealth gap and increase opportunities for all people. We know that these issues are important to our target demographic when it comes to DE&I recruitment. So that's how it pertains to recruitment marketing.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So it all sort of ties together. This is really interesting stuff. And you mentioned a conscious effort to increase diversity at T. Rowe Price. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes. We have a mandate from the very top of the house to increase diversity at the firm, and especially in the U.S. amongst Black, African American, and Latinx talent. As I mentioned, DE&I is not new at T. Rowe Price. We've been in the space for over 20 years. And as a result, we do have a diverse company in the context of the overall U.S. population. So, for example, we have a higher percentage of African American talent at the firm than the overall percentage of African American people in the U.S. But representation is not as well penetrated in all areas of the firm, nor at all levels of the firm. And that's what we're changing. So we're engaged in a multi-year effort to do this, and we're about a year in now. We started with research, which directed us to the fact that equity, purpose, and belonging are the three most important content pillars for our target audience. And so from there, we've built out a multi-channel, multi-story approach in which every execution ties back to those themes of equity, purpose, and belonging. In other words, how we achieve equity for people of color at the firm, the purpose of the firm, which is to help people close the gap between what they have and what they'll need, and increasing access to wealth creation for all people so as to narrow the racial wealth gap. And finally, belonging. it's all well and good to bring underrepresented talent into the company, but if they don't experience a sense of belonging, they won't stay. So we are a highly collaborative and inclusive firm, and we are well positioned to do this work. And our team absolutely loves it.
Great. I can tell you're very passionate about it. Fantastic. So talk to us more about the structure of the employer brand function, perhaps also in terms of the team and the reporting lines.
Right. So we are a marketing team within human resources, meaning we're the only 7 people focused on marketing within HR. Yeah. This has its pros and cons. The pro would be the support of our CHRO, as well as from our global head of associate engagement and corporate responsibility, who is my boss. She's a nearly 30-year veteran of the firm and is one of the most senior people of color at the firm. She's built a diverse team, and I've built a diverse team under her leadership. So I know from listening to other episodes you've done that a select few people have talked about the importance of a diverse team. I would say, and I want to say here, this is absolutely crucial to this work for anyone who's thinking about getting into it. The number of times in a single day that we leverage the collective diversity on the team, because we all bring a different perspective and set of experiences, makes the work so much stronger, and frankly, a lot more fun. Another pro to sitting within HR is working with our very smart and dedicated HR analysts to mine the HR data from our applicant tracking system to measure the effectiveness of our campaigns. So we need to know, are they bringing in more of the candidates we're targeting? How many are making it onto interview slates? How many are getting hired? We're also deeply interested in how many stay with the firm and progress and eventually become alumni of the company, hopefully remain engaged with us. And the latter part of that associate life cycle is under the purview of one of my colleagues as part of that associate engagement team we're on. So those are some tangible benefits to sitting within HR. If there's a con to the reporting structure, I would say it's the need to lobby for space on channels which we don't control, because we don't sit in corporate marketing. So we don't have dedicated employer brand channels on social media, as one example. So we need to be extremely organized and collaborative, with our internal corporate marketing partners who do control those channels, or we can't get our content out into market. So despite the hard work over the last 2 years, as I mentioned, we just formed the team a couple weeks before the pandemic. We're still known inside the company by some as HR marketing. And I would say to all listeners, that's a pet peeve of mine. I really don't like that name. To all listeners in the same spot, I'd advise the banning of the term HR marketing. Effective employer brand building is every bit as vital to the success of a company as product brand building. It's not an HR initiative. It's a vital corporate function, in my opinion.
Amen to that. Yes, let's retire HR marketing. And yeah, absolutely. And I think that the boards and the C-level executives that get employer brand, they realize that it's a critical function to drive the business forward, to have the right talent in place for the future of the business.
That's right. Absolutely.
So turning to employee value proposition, first of all, do you have an EVP defined, and what does it look like?
Yeah, so we are planning to refresh our employer or employee value proposition in 2022. I've heard it mentioned both ways. I do use both employer and employee because I think it should cover both vantage points, ideally. I would be really interested in hearing from your listeners how many of their EVPs have really stood the test of the pandemic. My guess is the numbers are fairly low. When I think about the fundamental changes that have taken place in the last 2 years and which took place over the course of that first weekend in March 2020, in the U.S. at least, when we went from fully in the office to fully remote, it's hard to imagine an EVP that doesn't need a second look. To provide some context to your listeners who might be early in their career, when I had my first child and asked to work 1 day a week from home, I was unequivocally turned down. And this was at what is still one of the most progressive companies in the world. But at that time, the notion that, white collar non-sales employees could be just as effective out of the office was completely unheard of.
Yeah.
So as we move towards 3 days in the office and 2 days remote for most of our global roles at T. Rowe Price, and as we encourage our associates to work with their manager to work in ways which best suit their personal and family needs, we've entered a completely new employment landscape where the employee and not the company is at the center. So, other reasons for the need to refresh the EVP include the fact that while we've included D&I in our EVP for many years, As I mentioned before, we're now much more intentional about the equity piece. And as I mentioned, this permeates throughout all the work we're doing in community and indeed in our company's overall purpose. So we're trying to help people close the gap between what they have and what they need to live comfortably in their finances. And that's equity at its core. So we'll be taking a second look at the EVP next year.
Yes. And as you say, that's something I hear a lot from employer brand leaders, that they need to adapt their EVPs to the new reality for sure. And it's good practice anyway to review an EVP every 3 years, I think. So we'll stand by to check in again once that's been worked on. Now, if we look at measuring results and metrics and so on, what does it look like at T. Rowe Price?
So we embed metrics into all of our work across the owned, earned, and paid media channels. Because we looked after employer brand thought leadership as well as marketing and PR for our community and T. Rowe Price Foundation work, we are able to track the effectiveness of our messaging strategies in fairly short order, across the stack. And because we sit within HR, we're becoming more able to tap into hard data about applications and hires and mobility throughout the firm. We also engage Link Humans to provide a baseline measurement of our employer brand overall, which was very helpful. Because we don't have dedicated employer brand channels, and until this team forum didn't put out a great deal of employer brand content external to the organization, what we found from that research was that most of the chatter about us came from Glassdoor, which was in and of itself very interesting. Because without a response strategy on Glassdoor, it's essentially a one-sided conversation about your company.
Yes, absolutely. So, we had the good fortune of partnering with T. Rowe Price early this year with the Employer Brand Index. And I'm interested in knowing if there were any surprises from the data we provided you, or did it confirm some of the suspicions you had already?
I think it confirmed quite a few things. I mean, one thing that we came out very highly rated around benefits, the benefits that we offer to our associates, which was sort of something that we knew in the background, but your research yielded basically a focus, like a enhanced focus on that. So I mentioned retention marketing at the top of the call. We are engaging in some retention marketing activities to make sure that the people who work at the firm who may have joined, right out of university, maybe weren't thinking so much about retirement at that time, might not even realize what an incredible retirement program we offer to our associates. It's almost 2x, the industry average. We want to make sure that they know that, right? If they're thinking about making a move to another firm, we want to make sure they know what they'll be giving up in that space. So benefits came out as an area of opportunity for us, an area where we do well, but we should really talk about it more and more intentionally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about matching up the sentiment with the volume of data for sure. And I'm also interested in if you've been able to socialize this data internally, and if so, what the reactions have been for not just from HR and employer brand, but from other parts of the business. Yeah,
we had about 50 people on an 8 a.m. call on a Monday morning. So there was that much interest in it. So we did a readout about 2 weeks ago, and it was across, corporate marketing and research and HR, talent acquisition, DE&I, and other partners, very senior people as well on the line. So it was nice that there was that much interest, and we're absolutely folding that into our plans, as I said, for 2022, not only for retention marketing, but recruitment marketing as well.
That's great to hear. All right. Julie, you've been in this role for a little while now, so I'm sure you're sitting on loads of great tips for our listeners who want to be, or they might be already employer brand professionals, but they may want to improve.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a tip. So I would say first, especially given the work that we're doing at T. Rowe Price around DE&I, build a diverse team. Especially if you're working at a multinational company. A lot of employer brand teams consist of only early talent too. And I think that's a mistake. You should aim for a range and experience level, sexual orientation, ethnicity. If you're into military recruitment, you better have a military veteran on the team and so on. So just think about your brand positioning, who you're going for. Make sure that your employer brand team is representative of that target audience that you're headed for. And the second tip I would say is to think about employer brand, well beyond your social media presence. I think too often we focus just on employer brand as kind of a social media play. You should be looking really hard at earned media, as well as paid and owned, and developing thought leadership that brings together your company's larger purpose as well as your EVP, and make sure you create a clear link between the two. And then I guess my third tip is stay positive, especially if you're working on some of the tough issues that we've talked about in this podcast. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to give in to cynicism and negativity and to assume the worst in people, or to retreat to what you think is a safe space, but that really ends up being an echo chamber many times. So I would say don't give in to that. It won't help your work. It won't help you as an individual professional in the end, and it won't help your team. So, and I guess if I could add another tip, I would hire people who are all in. I have hired people who are all in. You can't do this work unless your heart is in it.
All in. Okay. And how, when you're interviewing people, what are the telltale signs of someone who's all in?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I would say, past performance, might indicate future behavior. But I would say, talk to people about what's important to them personally. I think it's pretty clear when somebody is giving you canned language around particularly DE&I, and when they're able to point to their own involvement in community and what the issues are that are important to them and how they spend their free time. I think how you spend your free time is a pretty good tell on what's most important to you, your discretionary time. So if you're somebody who has worked in, in an urban school, or if you've worked in, sustainability efforts, and then you come and tell me that you're passionate about ESG, I'm a lot more inclined to go with the fact that you're being genuine and that your heart is in it. And that's what I look for.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Great. Right. So Julie, what is it that makes your job so special?
I think, this is still, employer brand marketing is still a new frontier of marketing. It's not still as widely understood as would be ideal, but the pandemic has really underscored its value. So it's really a great time to be in employer brand marketing. And by the way, your practice and craft, if you are in it, is highly marketable and a really nice differentiator from other types of marketing.
Yes, absolutely. It's very unique, and it's suddenly on the up and up. Fantastic. So this has been great, Julie. Where can our listeners connect with yourself, and where can they learn more about the firm?
I love using LinkedIn, so please connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in working with T. Rowe Price, have a look at our careers portal pages, where you can read our blog, which covers topics such as, if you could change one thing about your time at T. Rowe Price, what would it be? We try to give advice to prospective associates from the point of view of people who actually work at the firm. Other topics have included, new hires give tips on how to navigate the virtual halls of T. Rowe Price. So hopefully those are instructive blog posts if you're interested in working with us. It would be disingenuous to say that everything is perfect at the firm. So we try to show, pros and cons, and make sure that progress is taking place regardless.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today, Julie.
Thank you, Jorgen. Appreciate the invitation.
Okay, folks, so there we go. Feel free. Well, I encourage you to reach out to Julie on LinkedIn, and thank you ever so much for sharing those insights with us on the podcast. And also, if you would like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so at employerbrandingpodcast.com. You'll have all the options there, including show notes and articles from previous episodes. Finally, if you, just like T. Rowe Price and Julie and her team, if you would like to inject some science, some data, some evidence into all that hard work you're doing in employer brand, feel free to check out the Employer Brand Index. So the Link Humans Index is where we investigate what candidates, employees, and alumni really think about your company as an employer. And we can also look at your competitors. So talent competitors, business competitors, aspirational competitors, whoever is fighting for the same talent. So that is the Employer Brand Index. You can check it out at linkhumans.com, or feel free to email me and I can walk you through it. thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, and I look forward to catching up with you next time. Hey,
Jorgen, why don't marketers like trampolines?
Why not?
They're afraid of the high bounce rate.